Um, so thank you for taking some time today to chat with us. We're really excited to just continue to work together. We wanted to make sure that we held some space to talk about the final budget. It feels like a lifetime ago at this point, but I know that lots of folks are moving in lots of different directions. So we wanted to kind of recap with where we're at right now, what happened in the final budget. We also want to talk a little bit about what happened in the season, what went well, what didn't, kind of what's coming up next, because there is a partial expansion of free school meals that we secured last year. So we'll talk a little bit more about the community eligibility provision and what's still in play for schools, for certain schools to offer free meals to all their kids. And then we'll close out by talking about next steps and moving forward and where do we go from here. So we wanted to catch folks hopefully before many are off in different directions through the summer months and enjoying all these awesome things in the chat. But let's kick right off. Well, actually, before we kick off, I really just wanted to say on the next slide, we have an awesome picture of all of us at the Capitol. So Abby, if you want to do next slide. And just say thank you. There was so much work that has happened this year, from a stellar event at the Capitol, but also just ongoing advocacy, calls into legislators, op-eds, all these different pieces that so many of you stepped up and really worked with elected officials and the relationships that you had to really elevate the importance of school meals, and especially offering it for free to all of our kids. So just thank you. We really wanted to we would be remiss to kind of dive into this without really kind of taking the time to express our gratitude for all of the work that you all continue to do and how you all continue to stay engaged in this work. We're just so grateful, and we wouldn't be where we are today without each of your advocacy. So thank you. Abby, do you want to talk a little bit about what's included in the final budget?
Yes, let's just dive right into a chart. So I think everyone knows at this point, as Jess mentioned too. So this year, while we didn't get can I call it the full Monty? I feel like that's not the right thing. We didn't get the full thing, the full deal. But we did manage to maintain the expansion that was started in fiscal year 24. So fiscal year 24 means starting this past school year. So over this school year, schools that were enrolled in community eligibility provision, the federal provision, and Jess will get a little more into detail on the implementation of that, and the threshold for how schools are and can be included in that. But we saw just a really great turnout in schools enrolling in community eligibility who hadn't been before. So that actually contributed to an $11 million addition to the funds that were in fiscal year 24. So for fiscal year 25, that's for this upcoming school year, there's 145.6, did I get that right? Yeah, million allocated for what's called the state subsidy. So community eligibility provision, state subsidy. We've been referring to it as expansion of free school meals, because that's really what it's doing, is it's making it possible for more schools to be enrolled and be fully reimbursed for the meals that they're serving, and offering those free school meals to all students in their school. So really great to see that 11 million. Unfortunately, that 90.4 million that are we estimated would be needed to make it fully free for all was not included. And I think the next slide actually has a little more about that too, or maybe I'm jumping ahead too much. So as I mentioned, there is this great take of the community eligibility provision. There are now over 4,300 schools across New York State that are participating in CEP. The state subsidy is specifically for those schools in CEP. And we've really found that the CEP enrollment exceeded expectations this year. So this is a really great.
Really great.
Oh, no.
And another great turnout from this past year is we continue to have really strong support in the legislature. As with fiscal year 24 and the one House budgets this year for fiscal year 25, one House budgets in the state and Senate also put in that full amount to make it free for all. Unfortunately, in the final budget, that wasn't included. But you know, with both that expression within the one House budgets and there are bills in the Senate and Assembly, and those universal school meal bills have huge support. So over 2/3 of the Assembly, over 100 plus co-sponsors on that Assembly bill, and over 1/3 of the Senate. So over, I think it's like 23 senators have co-sponsored the Senate bill. So we really are heartened to see this continued support in the legislature, and we continue to have really strong champions in the lead sponsors on those bills, Senator Hinchey and Assemblywoman Gonzalez Rojas. So that's kind of where we stand. And as I mentioned, Jess will take us a little more in depth on the implementation piece and the nuances of that with the CEP state subsidy. So I will pass it back to you, Jess.
Thanks, Abby. CEP, really, it's so exciting to kind of see the evolution in New York. I've been fortunate to work on CEP since it became an option in New York in 2010. And just to see kind of where we're at now as a state is simply incredible. And I'm really excited. Our coalition was actually invited to an anti-hunger policy conference to talk about this policy as an incremental step towards universal school meals. So just wanted to take some time to celebrate kind of our victory this year and kind of talk about what it means for schools. So just a little level setting. I know I see some school nutrition directors who know this like the back of their hand on this call, but maybe some other folks who may not be as entrenched in school meal policy. The next slide kind of tells us here what the community eligibility provision is. So just some level setting here. It has been available in New York. It started as a pilot since the 2010-2011 school year. It is an option through the federal school lunch and breakfast program. So schools are still operating their regular programs, having to follow nutrition standards, serving meals, submitting for reimbursement, having oversight from the state education department. All of that stays the same, but there's simplified administration. And they can feed kids at no cost and aren't allowed to charge kids, aren't allowed to collect applications. So there's some pieces here within the provision. What's new that happened this school year alongside the CEP state subsidy was a federal rule change that lowered the eligibility threshold for community eligibility. It was previously 40%, and now any school, group of schools, or district with at least 25% of identified students can offer breakfast at no charge and lunch at no charge through the community eligibility provision. For those who, we're not going to talk too much about identified students, but those to get to that 25% threshold, that 25% is a subset of their free and reduced percentage. It's the number of kids who are automatically certified for a free school meal because they participate in another means tested program or are in a federally categorically eligible category. So foster care kids, homeless kids, kids who are considered migrant, but also kids who participate in SNAP, their household participates in SNAP, and certain Medicaid households fall into that category for that 25%. So just a little bit of background there. This impact of this lowering of the threshold combined with the CEP state subsidy has had tremendous impact throughout New York State. We are seeing now more schools than ever in New York State operating CEP and offering universal school meals. Abby mentioned that 4,300 schools, that's 85% of schools that offer a national school lunch program are operating community eligibility in New York State. 26 counties in New York. We have, I think, 62 counties. You can correct me if I think 62 or 64, I get it mixed up, but 26 of those counties have universal access for all their kids who attend school within that county. So we don't have perfect county lines, but that's kind of what State Ed is talking about with 26 counties, which I think is no small feat of counties who have full coverage of universal school meals. Of the schools eligible to participate in community eligibility, 99% of them are participating. So
Wow.
really incredible, really incredible. I'm excited to be compared. I mean, it's hard with other schools with universal school meals statewide, but I think we'll be among the tops in terms of states participating in eligible schools participating in CEP. More kids are eating school meals. I got like a chilling update in a good way from state education department. They were at the School Nutrition Association conference up in Lake George a couple weeks ago now, and shared some just staggering impact already. So within those 6 months of implementation of that rule change and the community eligibility provision, there's been a 12% increase statewide in school meals in New York this school year, which if you're not that involved in participation trends, typically we see, even with changes with community eligibility coming an option in New York, we saw maybe a 3%, maybe a 4% increase. A 12% increase statewide is tremendous in the size of a state like New York. What this translates to is even more staggering. It is 18 million additional school lunches have been served this school year, and 10 million additional school breakfasts served. It's absolutely incredible to see how fast this funding went straight to the ground and fed kids immediately. So what an effective policy. It really really fires me up for this type of work and all the work that's happening on the ground to make sure kids are getting access to the meals they need. Just really exciting updates here. We're also talking with state agency about increased federal funds. We are seeing an uptick of federal funds coming into New York State because of this subsidy. So we're asking about that additional drawdown to kind of see what that state investment meant with federal dollars. So we're really excited to share some of that soon. And school meals are improving. So anecdotally, I was able to really connect with directors. And I always say that school lunch directors and school lunch staff are really superheroes. These are folks on the front lines, smiling, feeding our kids every day. And lots of them were able to share with me what this additional money means for them in their community eligibility schools. Nutrition directors shared with me that they're increasing staff wages so that they can keep their staff, that they can be more competitive as an employer within their communities. They're offering more professional development for their staff, so more food safety training, cutting training, so that they can offer more fresh fruits and vegetables because they're able to buy more food, fresher food, local food. I was talking to one of the directors up in Messina. I hope that's okay that I shout her out, and she told us about so many different farmers local to her now that she's able to get 5 to 6 additional farmers now that she can buy directly from, and she has the funds and the capacity where she's not chasing down school meal debt. She's really focused on procuring more food from local farms around her. So just such exciting work. I know it's easy to feel disappointed that we don't have universal school meals yet, but I really wanted to make sure that we took some time to really see the great work already happening within 6 months, within this last school year. It's just a tremendous success for what we're seeing with this expansion of community eligibility. So on the next slide, what next needs to be done? To be fair, 99% of schools participate in community eligibility. There is an ongoing application process for that. There's a 4-year cycle for community eligibility, and schools can re-up that cycle at any time. So during this time, what our coalition is doing and what we do, especially at Hunger Solutions New York, is we work with schools to encourage them to take a look at their numbers and recertify as often as they can to ensure that they continue, because demographics change, especially for schools right on that cusp of eligibility. Some schools we've heard came in by a handful of students, sometimes 1 or 2 students, to get them to that 25% threshold. So we want schools to keep their eye on that number and make sure that they're able to sustain community eligibility, especially if they're close to that threshold of eligibility. If you know of schools, there are a handful of schools, 99% is not 100%. There are a handful of schools that still may be eligible to participate. There are an estimate of who may be eligible for community eligibility and are not participating on the state agency website. So the state education department each year publishes a list of schools that are eligible or near eligible for community eligibility. And there are some schools on that list, probably about I don't want to guess in this moment, but you can go there and find those numbers there. And another piece too, you know, if schools are maybe on the threshold or looking to become eligible, SNAP participation is a driver of community eligibility participation. So that is work that we do at Hunger Solutions New York to encourage more families, eligible families, to enroll in SNAP. And that really does have a direct impact on community eligibility and schools' ability to sustain and adopt the provision to offer free meals for all kids. So if you are in that boat, if you're a school district, or if you know of a school district that may be on that list, please feel free to connect with us. I have Francesca DiGiorgio on my team here who works directly one-on-one with school districts to help schools enroll in SNAP. Or excuse me, enroll in CEP. And then we also work with schools to help promote SNAP outreach. So that's kind of the next steps needed. June 30th is the deadline. I see some directors on this call, school nutrition directors, and I'm sure that's top of mind for those folks. And feel free to lend a hand if that's helpful. And Francesca added her email in the chat too, if that's helpful. Awesome. So keeping up the momentum, I'll kick it back over to you, Abby, for this part.
Jess. So celebrating our successes, but also our work is not done, right? So of our latest estimate, there were over 320,000 students in New York State who didn't have access to free school meals in over 650 schools. So we know that while the CEP state subsidy is a huge step in the right direction, and really is everything Jess outlined, you know, like 99% of schools eligible for CEP being enrolled, like that's just huge. We're making great strides. But we know that it remains out of reach for many schools in New York State. So listed out here, sorry, I don't have it in, keep looking over to my other screen. So the CEP state subsidy, it is kind of a mouthful with the alliteration there. So reaching struggling families outside of CEP schools who are ineligible for free school meals. There was just a recent report about the continued food insecurity in households with children throughout the state. And we know that it is a persistent challenge to make sure that families have access to food. Well, we saw some improvements in food insecurity with the pandemic era supports. We know that there continues to be a rise in food insecurity. So it's really important that we're making sure when children are at school, they have access to these meals. I think I'm probably preaching to the choir here. We also know that there are barriers to applying with all those school meal applications. There are all sorts of barriers to applying for free school meals. And having what we term the benefits cliff, it creates this arbitrary threshold of who should be eligible, who should have access to free school meals. And in those schools that don't have CEP, there's still this arbitrary number of, if you're income qualified, then you can have free school meals. So we really want to make sure that we are ensuring an equitable school meal program statewide. So we are continuing this campaign. I think you all know. We also know that ISP, as just described, the identified student percentage that is used on the back end to qualify schools for community eligibility provision. We know that this is an undercount of poverty. So even in the schools that, well, any number is too big, but if a school is 24.9% eligible with the ISP, the identified student percentage of children enrolled in those programs that Jess outlined, that percentage of students doesn't qualify for CEP. So we know that that's also an undercount of poverty. So even though any number is too high, the number even 24.9% is not even capturing the full number of students in that school who, yeah. So,
Lady.
Sorry, was there a question? Oh, no, it's just a, So we also know that there's low participation in SNAP, and as just described, how Hunger Solutions works to make sure that SNAP enrollment is maximized. That's that contributes to making sure schools can reach that ISP threshold. There are also stark inequalities in these communities and in schools where there or in communities where there's low population density. Though we do see many of the areas left behind are suburban, where we know the cost of living is much higher than in other parts of the state. So another challenge with CEP is that some schools in the district may be eligible, but not necessarily all the schools in the district. So then you have this inequity even within the same school district. You might have kids within the same family who are having different experiences with school meals when they go to school. So it's really important that we make sure this is strong implementation of the current CEP state subsidy, but we also go back to the table in fiscal year 26. It feels crazy to say that. So we are already thinking ahead for next year and what we need to do to continue this strong campaign to call for universal free school meals. And Joss, I'll pass it back to you for, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't jump to the slide when I was talking about ISP being an undercount of poverty. We will share these, for one, we have a recording of this webinar and we'll have of this meeting, and we will have the slides available as well. But Jess, I will pass it to you to talk about next steps.
Awesome. Thanks, Abby. I was going to say the same thing. We can definitely share slides, and it didn't feel like you skipped a slide. So awesome. So in terms of next steps and, why we really wanted to get together, especially before the summer, is to start to plant some seeds about, what we're trying to do in terms of a strategic planning, in terms of really kind of deciding the direction of actions and strategy for the upcoming year. So first, we're excited. You're the first to hear, and we'll be sending this out more broadly after this call, is we're launching a coalition survey. This is, so there's some open-ended questions, which might make it a little bit longer, but it is a very brief survey. Just a little bit about your experiences, what you heard from elected officials, to really get around the barriers around a fully funded universal school meal program. So your insights are really, were really helpful last year. If you were around last year, we did the survey, and a lot of what we got out of that survey is what we decided to reorganize coalition structure, focus in different ways. So really want to stress the importance of this coalition survey, and we really take it very seriously, and your feedback very seriously. We really want this to be a collaborative process and lift up voices of all of those involved. So please take the time to fill out this coalition survey. We'll make sure if someone could pop the link in the chat, that would be super helpful. And if you type this in, this is case sensitive for your Bitly, but we'll also send this around in the follow-up. The other piece that we're really thinking about this summer, and this would probably be for the new school year, is really highlighting the success that we talked about. I was so inspired and recharged hearing from school nutrition directors, hearing from the state agency about what the investment in school meals has meant for communities, for families, for school meal programs that are really the bedrock of some transformational change that we can make in kids' lives. And so we really want to highlight those stories of schools that have newly offered free school meals in this past school year. Can we come and visit your school district? Could we take videos and really show folks in Albany? You could always do visits with your elected officials as well, but we're also thinking about other ways to make sure that we're bringing to the halls of Albany really what this investment means and the voices of those directly impacted front and center of what it means when a state invests in free school meals. I think that's a big focus that we want to take this next school year. If you want to be involved in that, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Abby. We're really looking for schools to highlight, that success. At the same time, we're also looking to highlight the struggles of folks who are still without universal school meals and what that means for your district. I think the more that we can bring the lived experience of what is happening on the ground, the better. And that's really a priority for us in this coming year. So please feel free to reach out if you want to be involved in some of those success stories, especially if you're from a school, but also if you're from a parent. I know as a parent, receiving free school meals for the first time this school year makes my life so much easier. Honestly, I'm always encouraging my kids to eat at school. It makes our mornings easier. One less thing to do as we're all trying to rush out the door and pack those lunch boxes. So even if you're not directly within a school district but have a short story to share, we're really looking to elevate those experiences. And again, I think more broadly, if you're looking to get more involved in this next year, have ideas for engagement, please feel free to reflect that in the survey, but also feel free to reach out to Abby or I in this next year, not next year, in these next couple months as we're going through the summer. On the next slide is our contact information. I'm sure from our emails and everything that you have that, but just in case, here is our information. We're always happy to hop on the phone and brainstorm ideas. And we just want to be a resource to you all. Let me open it up. I know we are at time, so I don't want to. I'm happy to stay on if folks have questions to ask, but also too, if I know some folks had to hop, feel free as well. But I'm happy to stay on if folks have questions. Thanks.
And Jess, I do think we have an hour allocated. So I know some people had to hop right at 10, but we're
okay. So I just saw the top of the hour and so we have plenty of time for questions. Thanks, Abby. Jan, we'll go to you.
Okay. It seems as if the stumbling block must have been the governor. And do we have, I mean, it's kind of obvious, but do we have hopes, plans, schemes to, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's 2 years in a row in which we made it into the one house budget, but didn't make it that final lift.
Very, very observant, Jan. So absolutely right. So we have been incredibly successful with the legislature. Both years we have secured full funding for universal in both one house budgets. And, you know, I think while I think it's, and this is a safe space to share as well. You know, I do think the governor's office is a stumbling block. And I think this is why we're trying to maybe the angle of how do we kind of look at the positive of what this current investment has meant in terms of job creation, in terms of economic development for farmers, and maybe kind of take a little bit of that angle because jobs and farmers seem to be maybe might be something that resonate for folks. Also farm to school, thinking about that and how universal school meals and that type of investment builds that capacity. So we're thinking about those pieces, but I would be remiss to just put it on the governor's office. There are 3 folks in the room, and it's also we wonder if it's also is it a top priority for leadership in both houses as well. It's been such 2 consecutive years of a lot happening in education and the broader education budget, a huge investment and influx of foundation aid in the first year that we were at this. And then the second year, a big cut. And a lot of the energy, a lot of the focus was around restoring that cut to that aid. So it's hard to kind of point in one direction. But I will say that we really need to also stay focused on leadership in both houses to ensure that this they continue to feel pressure that this is a priority.
Well, you should tell her so she could be mad and get it out her system now.
Okay, I can't find the thing to.
And in terms of inviting action from everyone here and anyone in the coalition who wants to weigh in on this front, you know, we are open to ideas of directions and ways that we can put pressure in different ways. So We don't have all the answers, and some of you might have creative ideas or insights, and please always feel free to reach out or put things out there that you think would be energizing.